All too soon, the day turned into dusk, and we were preparing for our risky operation. It was fairly appropriate to call it a suicide mission, as we were so few compared to the Phantoms that had so many disposable agents, and had the advantage. Nevertheless, my fellow secret agents and I were prepared for such a burden. I was inspecting my shotgun when Fear limped his way over to me. I looked up and slightly narrowed my eyes. I can't believe that you're still coming, even after that injury. As usual, my friend didn't care much about the fact that he could have died, and instead shrugged carelessly.
You know that nothing will keep me back from this mission. We've come so far that I'll be damned if I let a bullet wound put me down.
Despite the unease of bringing an injured assassin along, I knew that there was no chance of making Fear stay behind. He was too stubborn for his own good. Instead, I opted to sigh and nodded at Fear. As frustrating as it was, his stubbornness was a trait I had to respect. Fear was already set to go, as he replenished the amount of arrows in his pack and replaced his scorched armor with a lighter version. It would not have offered him as much protection from bullets and explosions as the other set, but it would allow him to be lighter on his feet, something that was absolutely vital for an infiltration mission. Said person gestured his head towards the door.
We should get going,
he stated simply. I nodded in agreement, and together we left the room for perhaps the last time. We arrived at the command post where everyone else was already waiting. There was just one person missing, though. I walked over to Pete, who was busy typing on a miniature laptop, probably making some last-minute arrangements. Where's Agent Kian? I asked. Isn't he supposed to be with you and the distraction team?
He is, rounding up some old buddies of his. I need the extra buddies for the distraction team to work.
With that, he straightened his posture and walked over to Agent Arrow and engaged in a quiet conversation. Agent Evans came up beside me. The young agent was already in a specialized suit and was looking through a simple brown pack, probably filled with the explosives he needed. You ready for this? I asked. The agent nodded eagerly.
Absolutely. I can't wait to show the phantom bastards what our seekers are made of.
Despite the gravity of the situation, I couldn't help but smile at the agent's enthusiasm. At least one of us felt invincible. You and me both, kid, I commented. We were then interrupted by the strong voice of Pete.
Alright everyone, we're moving out!
Without any question, all of us gathered our tools, which consisted of thermal lances, among other things, which would only be used if we failed to hack a terminal or open a shielded door. As for our diving equipment, we deemed the oxygen tanks too heavy to carry with us during the swim. Luckily, Agent Arrow still had some contacts in New York, who delivered us rebreathers, which were a much better option. They could last up to 8.5 hours theoretically, and they didn't release bubbles, which could have potentially given away our location. Alas, we made our way out of the temporary haven. Outside was dark, with the exception of the dim light posts that were littered all over the streets. To minimize our chance of detection, we stayed in the darkness as much as we could, and whenever we had to cross an exposed road, we always went in pairs, and only went once the Phantom patrols walked by. It took quite a bit of effort, but all of us managed to reach the river, suffering only from an adrenaline rush. It was the spot where Agent Evans would split up from the rest of us. Pete walked over to him and clapped a hand on his shoulder.
You be careful, alright? Don't take any chances just to be a hero.
The young agent nodded his head.
I won't.
He said.
I promise not to let you guys down.
Agent Arrow walked over to him as well and inspected the suit one more time. He then gave a nod of approval.
The suit systems are operational. Just try not to get it ripped or anything. Your body heat will leak out if that happens.
The young agent nodded once more.
Roger that.
He simply said.
Sir, I do have an idea though.
Oh?
Agent Arrow replied with a raised eyebrow. Pete looked at the young agent in curiosity as well. Agent Evans appeared momentarily flustered with the amount of attention he received from the high operative agents, but he quickly composed himself.
Well, with the suit Agent Arrow gave me, I figured I could manage to sneak some explosives and add 2 missile guns as well. Might work to our advantage.
Both lead agents contemplated on the suggestion for several minutes. I as well reflected on Agent Evans' idea. It was extremely risky, but if we could manage to pull it off, then we might be able to call in air support. Finally, Pete nodded his head.
Alright. You may proceed with your plan, but we strongly advise you to exercise extreme caution. One slip up, and you are as good as dead.
Agent Evans nodded feverishly.
Of course, sir. I'll be careful.
He then looked down and chuckled a bit.
You know, ever since I joined the Seekers, I've always dreamed of doing something for the good of the organization, and in turn the world. This seems to be the best opportunity.
Pete smiled gently and held out his hand.
It's been an honor working with you.
Agent Evans seemed taken aback, for he stared at the hand and Pete's face before he snapped back to reality, and shook hands. They released the grip after a good shake, and Agent Evans hung his pack over his shoulder.
I should get going,
he said. Pete nodded, and with that, the young agent left for his destiny. The head warrior then turned around to face us.
Alright everyone, get out your equipment and get ready. You'll have 5 minutes to do so. Good luck, and we'll see you on the surface when you're done.
With that, Pete left towards another street. My partners and I did as we were told, and stripped off any unnecessary articles of clothing. I took off my thick cloak, and placed it neatly into my sack. I then placed the set of goggles on my forehead, and adjusted the rebreather over my face. Once I deemed it usable, I glanced up and was met with a sight of Fear, who was looking at the diving equipment in his hands, and then at his attire. I grinned. Guess you'll have to abandon the armor, pretty boy, I teased. Fear rolled his eyes at my immaturity, but nonetheless removed his armor. He stripped down until he was in his undersuit. I glanced at Agent Claire, and saw that she was staring at Fear with a slight blush on her face. I looked back at my friend, and smirked. As an assassin, Fear underwent intense training to put a lot of strain on his body. His well-toned body, if the way the Irishwoman stared at him was any indication. I shook my head, but a smile was still plastered on my face. We were all ready before the given time, and we gingerly stepped closer to the water bank. One of my eyes twitched involuntarily, as I dreaded what would happen next. Agent Arrow was already halfway in the water when he looked back at us.
Don't just stand there. The mission isn't going to complete itself,
the medic said. That snapped me back to attention, and apparently Fear and Claire as well, for we carefully stepped into the water as it reached higher up our bodies. I placed the goggles over my eyes, and with one last look at the Seeker headquarters building, I stuck my head down and swam towards the deeper end. The water was extremely dirty. I was hardly able to see around me, but Agent Arrow attached light rods to their backs to prevent us from wandering off. We swam for a few meters before the environment abruptly became darker than it was before. I assumed that was the moment we entered the underground channel. It was a good thing that Seeker training made us physically fit, otherwise I would have gotten tired long ago. I had no idea how long we swam for, but it certainly seemed like an eternity. Eventually we hit an area where there were various pieces of metal floating aimlessly through the dirty abyss. They must have been the remains of that sub that was bombed all those years ago. We then arrived at what seemed to be a damaged utility elevator. We all took our ropes and attached it to the weight that was down. Agent Arrow then took out a device of sorts and sent an electrical current through the wiring. The elevator activated and rapidly lifted us up. At last, we entered a shallow area and immediately disconnected ourselves from the cord. When Agent Arrow began to swim upwards, I knew that we finally arrived at our destination. Just as I thought, we all emerged in a cave-like entrance. It was dark and a bit creepy, but there were no phantoms, which spelled safety to me. We all got out and stretched our cramped muscles. All too eagerly, I removed the goggles from my face and tossed it aside, along with my rebreather. Fear sat down on a smooth rock with one hand pressed against his side. Concern passed through me as I made my way over to my friend. I sat beside him and looked at his side. "So how's your wound?" I asked.
It's fine.
Fear replied all too fast, but then he exhaled sharply in pain.
Damn it,
he said. My eyebrows furrowed as I took in his reaction. "You're hurt, Fear. You should have stayed back." Fear then looked at me with an unfamiliar fire in his eyes.
To hell with that.
He said.
I made you a promise to help you save Rachel, and I refuse to let a bullet wound stop me. I just need to rest.
I was upset about his circumstance, but I just nodded in acceptance. All right, but don't strain yourself anymore. The real mission hasn't even started yet. Before my friend could reply, Agent Arrow caught our attention as he waved us over. Gingerly, Fear got up and winced, but otherwise didn't react at all. I gestured to help him, but he lightly slapped my hand away, so I held my hands up in surrender and walked beside him. We all stood in front of Agent Arrow.
Alright, everyone. Part 1 of our mission ended. Now, Part 2 will commence shortly. That was about a 20-minute swim that we all endured, so I congratulate all of you for persevering. However, we've got more work to do. Hopefully, Agent Evans was able to set up numerous explosives within that time.
He then activated his earpiece.
Agent Evans, this is Agent Arrow. What is your status?
Agent Evans' voice came through, though it was a bit distorted due to our depth within the base.
Agent Evans here. I finished placing the explosives around the anti-missiles guns, and just started making my way down the levels. The suit is working perfectly. I'm actually quite surprised at the sloppiness of the Phantoms, though. Aren't they usually thorough?
Very good, Evans.
The medic replied.
Keep up the good work, but don't let your guard down.
Will do, sir. Evans out.
Agent Arrow signed out of the link before he looked at us.
Now comes the next step. We've got to head to higher ground where the interrogation rooms are. There, we will split into the 2 teams we discussed about. Watch each other's backs.
We all nodded in understanding. However, a nagging feeling started to develop in my gut when I heard Agent Evans' news. Ever since we came back, there were many instances where we narrowly avoided detection by the Phantoms. As Agent Evans said so himself, they were normally thorough in their work, and hardly anybody escaped their notice. Something was definitely wrong. I didn't have time to dwell on my concern, as my partners wrapped themselves with some cooled silver paper. I snapped myself back to attention, and did the same thing. If the plan went exactly how we wanted it, then Agent Arrow would successfully disable the electric board, which would activate the backup generator. As a result, the surveillance cameras would switch to thermal imagery, hence why we brought the cooled silver paper. Once we were fully covered, we all assembled into a single line and climbed up some steep rocks in order to reach the lowest level of Seeker HQ. We succeeded with minimal strain, and we quickly moved to the power source for the entire building. Expertly, Arrow accessed the power system and shut it all down. The lights automatically went out, and a low groaning sound filled the area as the backup generator kicked in. Arrow got up and took out a simple yet elegant silver knife.
Remember, we only have an hour, guys. We have to fulfill our mission while the Phantoms are unaware,
he said. He then turned and walked away. Without question, we followed him down the dimly lit hallway, careful to make sure to avoid any patrolling Phantoms. We arrived at an intersection of sorts that relayed several identical hallways. Agent Arrow then turned to face us.
We'll split up here. We'll cover more ground that way,
he suggested. As dangerous as it was, there was no other way to find Rachel faster. My teammates and I understood as we nodded and all headed off in our own direction. The normally dimmed hallways seemed even darker, if that were possible. Despite the fact that the paper had covered me would have rendered me practically invisible to the infrared specialized cameras, I still didn't want to take any chances, so I clung to the wall for dear life. I did that until I reached the end of the hallway and arrived at an armored door. Curious, I attempted to open it. However, the locks were bolted shut, yet there was an access panel beside it. As I was fumbling with the panel, a voice resonated through the unsettling quiet from behind me.
I'm afraid I can't let you do that.
As soon as the words were spoken, a hard object was pressed on the back of my head. You bitch, I murmured to myself as I turned around to face the gun pointed at my face.